buried, but it's probably one of the single most important things that is going on within that organization, and the public is unaware, and that's jail. The jail, because we don't see it, it's behind, all right? We don't see what goes on there. We don't understand the jail enterprise fund and how that came about. So we don't know what the ramifications that has to us in the community as taxpayers. And so I want to share a couple of things that have happened, some of the things that we're looking to do, because remember, there isn't anything that we looked at that we haven't looked at a solution to that problem. So what we do know is that the jail enterprise fund was a horrible idea. And what they did was when they built the jail, they built it under a business model. Okay? And so they thought, for whatever reason, that they were going to make money on it. Well, that's not true. We don't make money on emergency services. Emergency services is a black hole. And we look at county expenditures, we know that typically, and we're aligned with the national average, about 50%, 48%, 50% of county financing goes to emergency services. Right? So we know that. But what people don't know is that we had all this litigation, correct? All this litigation. But what we know from a law enforcement perspective, the jail itself has the highest probability for litigation against the entity. Okay? And the reason being is staff has 24/7 contact with the criminal element. And so when that happens, the likelihood of something going bad happens. And lawsuits result, and there's lawsuits as a result of that. So training and staffing is extremely important. And so what we do know is that the Sheriff's Department has said that, or they mentioned on their website that they are go by ACA guidelines, and that's the American Correctional Association. Well, what we found out is they do not go by ACA guidelines. And why is that important? The ACA, it's important because we know that the jail is staffing the jail with citizen volunteers when they fall short of trained professionals. So now you get these senior citizen posse members filling correctional billets within the detention setting. So that only puts the jail staff at risk, it puts them at risk as volunteers, as well as the inmate population, right? So now we're talking about what could happen. We know that we've been working in conjunction with the ACA for those to solution to these problems. And so some of the solutions, we want to instill pride and professionalism in the organization by providing a training and career path. Develop in-service training programs for staff, formal classroom environment, daily briefing training. And so what happens is, typically you have a half hour of briefing where you share information. Well, most of the time what happens, they'll say, well, nothing happened, see you later, bye, and leave. Well, I mean, that's time that we can be used to implement training for our staff, right? And have the deputies identify and do the training, right, for the rest of the staff. So that's important in terms of leadership and supervision and promotability for these people.
Time management.
Time management, absolutely. So one of the other things, though, that is essential is that we want to seek ACA accreditation. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that the ACA will come in and they will audit our facility. They will audit our physical plant, our financial, our policies and procedures, and our nutrition. I mean, they will audit everything. And then tell us what we're inefficient in. And then give us the opportunity to correct those issues. And then once we correct them, they come back and they certify us. Well, why is certification so important? Well, what it does is it gives us a protection under that umbrella so that if we're following these guidelines and something happens, they will help support us in litigation, right? Because they vetted that whole process. So it's extremely important in terms of the professionalization of the organization. So we've developed an action plan with the ACA so that when we take office, that it will be implemented. And we are also working with the Department of Corrections as well as the ACA to accomplish that. And you know, the other thing is when we look at the Jail Enterprise Fund, we have to, and I don't know why, I'm sure they've tried, but because they built it as a business model with negative amortization, so they're holding the note on this thing just like you hold your mortgage, and we can't pay that thing off. That money's going down a dark hole. We're just flushing it. Millions annually. And so we have to resolve that problem. Now, I don't have that answer. But we need to sit down with greater minds than I that deal in finance, in banking, in that industry, to come up with a resolution to that problem, because we will never pay that thing off, and we're throwing millions annually away. And so I don't know what we're going to do, but we have to address it and do something. And so we need to meet, like I said, greater minds than me and my staff, and bring these financial people together and try to resolve this issue. Because we know that if the VOC goes to the citizenry and says, hey, we need to raise your taxes, increase bonds, do you think we're going to get much support from the Office of the Sheriff right now? Absolutely not. Now, perhaps when we take over in November and we show the community what we're doing and how we're doing it, maybe they'll be a little bit more sympathetic and try to resolve the problem. But the bottom line is, it has to be resolved. Okay? It has to be resolved.
I'm confused. The taxpayers are dumping millions of dollars into the jail. How can the sheriff claim he's making $70,000 a month off of the jail?
Yeah, well,
that's kind of confusing.
It's called laundering money.
It's only 70,000, he's not telling you enough.
yeah.
I heard our jail was accepting prisoners from other jurisdictions.
Interim certification.
No, not interim. I'm sorry, I've got a break there. Grants. We're going to be looking at grants to help grant fund part of that money. So, you know, it is going to cost us a little, you know, a little bit of money, but we'll find the resources to get that accomplished, because we think it's important. And, you know, the community just doesn't see that because they don't see the facility, right? But, I mean, when we're talking about our risk for liability, that is the highest probability of litigation. And that shoe has just not fallen yet.
Are you aware of any grants that Ensminger actually avails the department of presently? Is it out of the grant loop?
I do not know. But one of the things, you know, in my former agency, I would, and of course we know monies are different here, but I would, as part of my budget, I would have $30,000 in grant writing funds. And people say, that's a lot of money, you know. Why would you know, have that much money for grant writing? Well, in the process of 10 years, I accessed almost $12 million in grants. And it's because of having professional grant writers, not having deputies or clerical staff write your grants, because these grants, they're looking for certain things within the grant, how things are worded, you know, all these little buzzwords. And so, to me, $30,000 was worth well over $10 million, right? So, so we want to do that as an organization, look for these grants. I'm sure they have grants. What they are, you know, I know that years ago they had a DUI grant, so that was for driving under the influence. They had extra patrols during holiday and that kind of stuff. I know that they had, you know, they weren't really grants, but they would work for the parks, you know, during the summer, provide extra patrols, so there would be grant money coming in for that. But specific grants in terms of, I'm assuming that their Bearcat, their SWAT vehicle, was probably purchased with grant money, you know, so those type of things. But again, money going to the wrong resources. And, you know, people ask me, am I anti-SWAT? And the answer is that he's making $70,000 a month off the Jail Enterprise Fund by housing inmates or what have you. So here's the numbers. We know, because we met with Lori Letwin, who's the financial director for the county, and we know that the average cost of a jail bed is $164 a day here in Teller County. And the reason it's $164 a day is because of the Jail Enterprise Fund and how it's financed. Now, the Department of Corrections, their estimate is it costs them $50 to $60 a day per bed, okay, to run their facility. ICE or INS as a federal detainees, they say it's $60 a day to house an inmate. So what's happening is, and this is when we're talking about, the critical of the jail population, is that we know that there's an average of about 55 county inmates in the jail that holds 126 people. Okay? So what my opponent has done is leased out beds to the DOC and ICE. So DOC pays $50 a day, and ICE pays $60. Well, we're still chasing 2/3 the cost of that bed. So that what he's done is he's overpopulated the facility up to at times 155 inmates, right, to chase that money. So by overpopulating the facility and understaffing the facility, what does that create? Risk. Risk for riots, and then not being able to handle those riots efficiently or appropriately, and then litigation again. So, that's kind of frightening in terms of that. So what has happened is that when we look at the data, he might make $4,000 to $5,000 a month for housing outside agencies inmates. So where does it come up with the $70,000? We found out through a core request, and I believe it was $330,000. Is that correct? Or so? Yeah. $330,000 the BOC gave additional money towards the jail enterprise fund. So he took that $330,000, which is your taxpayers' money, divided by 12, added by the $5,000, and saying that he made $70,000 a year, which is not true.
What's the BOC?
Board of Commissioners.
Board of County Commissioners.
Board of County Commissioners.
Sounds like he learned a little bit from Enron.
Yeah. So the answer to your question is no, they're not making $70,000 a year. They're making about $5,000 a month, and then so you take times that by 12, that's the actual numbers. But when you're chasing 2/3 the cost of the bed, again, we told you that's just a black hole.
We talked about the umbrella that they would, if you became a member of this or accepted in the organization.
Yes.
Would they also assist you in training jail personnel and so on and so forth?
Absolutely.
Would that be part of that
That's part of that process.
umbrella?
It is. And so, it's really significant. And we know it's a little expensive. I'm not going to lie to you. The accreditation for the ACA is $13,500. That's a lot of money. That's significant. Now, in working with in conjunction with the ACA, they're willing, because of what we're trying to accomplish here for our community, they're willing to take a reduced rate. And then talking with Warren, part of our staff that will be handling corrections, we're going to look at
Interim certification.
no, not interim. I'm sorry, I've got rigged it. Grants. We're going to be looking at grants to help grant fund part of that money. So it is going to cost us a little, a little bit of money, but we'll find the resources to get that accomplished because we think it's important. And the community just doesn't see that because they don't see the facility, right? But when we're talking about our risk for liability, that is the highest probability of litigation, and that shoe has just not fallen yet.
Are you aware of any grants that Ensminger actually avails the department of presently? Is it out of the grant loop?
I do not know. But one of the things, in my former agency, I would, and of course we know monies are different here, but I would, as part of my budget, I would have $30,000 in grant writing funds. And people say, that's a lot of money. Why would you, have that much money for grant writing? Well, in the process of 10 years, I accessed almost $12 million in grants. And it's because of having professional grant writers, not having deputies or clerical staff write your grants, because these grants, they're looking for certain things within the grant, how things are worded, all these little buzzwords. And so, to me, $30,000 was worth well over $10 million, right? So, we want to do that as an organization, look for these grants. I'm sure they have grants. What they are, I know that years ago they had a DUI grant, so that was for driving under the influence. They had extra patrols during holiday and that kind of stuff. I know that they had you know, they weren't really grants, but they would work for the parks, you know, during the summer, provide extra patrol, so there would be grant money coming in for that. But specific grants in terms of, I'm assuming that their Bearcat, their SWAT vehicle, was probably purchased with grant money, you know, so those type of things. But again, money going to the wrong resources. And, you know, people ask me, am I anti-SWAT? And the answer is no, I'm not. But, you know, there's a place for it and a purpose for it.
Use the right tool
And use
for
the right
job.
Right, use the right tool for the right job. You know, and do we need a Bearcat here in Teller County? The answer is no. You know, people ask me what I'm going to do about it, you know, and I don't want to, you know, scare away the, you know, the pro SWAT guys, but, you know, I believe in SWAT. There's a place for them and a proper tool. Do we need a Bearcat? Absolutely not.
What about those?
Hell, I don't know if
squads?
I'll put a darn for sale sign on that thing and get our jail accredited with the money. I mean, you know, so.
What about those snowmobiles and quads? Seems like it would be better used maybe for search and rescue or something.
Yeah, so we know, and I don't know if they did it with grant money, but the question or the statement was, you know, there's some snowmobiles were purchased in quads. And do the deputies really use them? The answer is no. But they would probably be well suited for search and rescue type you know, operations. So.
But search and rescue is a separate entity, correct?
Correct.
Is that in conjunction with your key focus area on rebuild the jail to minimize community liability?
Yes.
And along with that, I was under the impression that the jail was already paid off, and that the new Divide facilities that were built behind the old ones were paid off, and that their next project coming up is a new sheriff's office. If they are going to build a new sheriff's office here shortly, and you're in office, are you going to be on top of what you would like to see in that facility, so we don't run across a rebuild the jail, you know, rebuild the sheriff's office, you know, 5 years later, or remodel or whatever?
Yeah, you know, and thanks for your question. That's a difficult issue because you have the jail enterprise that is a disaster, and we don't have an answer for that. We're going to try to figure it out. But then, you know, we don't want to compound it by not addressing the other issues either. So if we're going to build a new sheriff's facility, we've got to make sure that we have the money to build it. You know, bonds or appropriate taxes are in place, because we certainly don't want to recreate what we've created. And you know what? If we have to stay in the same facility, then so be it. I mean, you know, there's got to be sacrifices. I would rather stay in the same facility and increase our training budget and do other things than have a new building. Now, new buildings are nice. They are, but it's not a necessity. So, you know, the bigger problem in terms of monies is our communication systems. You know, everybody's going to 800 megahertz system. The Office of the Sheriff has not. Woodland Park has already done 800 megahertz. Cripple Creek has not. Well, there's funding opportunities, and with FEMA, there's only a couple more years left in that gravy train accessing funding to get that done here. So that has to be a priority of our administration, instead of building the Sheriff's Department, fix our communication issue.
Teller County to put in a Krispy Kreme donut shop and Divide?
No. No, I have not. Although, we didn't all, we like donuts, but you know, we graduated from donuts to bagels.
Oh!
Yeah, so it's bagels.
So Einstein's brothers?
Yeah, Einstein brothers.
They sell all that at Venture Foods.